In the heart of a digital revolution, a name echoes across continents, captivating the imaginations of kids and adults alike. Nintendo. This isn't just a company, it's a phenomenon that's reshaped entertainment, pulling the video game industry from the ashes of obscurity to a billion-dollar empire. From the neon-lit arcades of America to the bustling streets of Japan, Nintendo's games, like the unstoppable Super Mario Bros., have become the gold standard, outshining every rival in their path. But behind the pixelated charm and catchy tunes lies a story as wild as any game, a tale of grit, gamble, and genius that transformed a small family business into a global juggernaut. Let's dive into the epic saga of Nintendo, a journey from shadowy backrooms to the bright screens of the world. Picture Kyoto in 1889, a city steeped in tradition, where lanterns cast soft glows on wooden homes, and the modern world feels like a distant dream. Here a young man named Fusajiro Yamauchi carves out his destiny. Raised with a love for art but bound by duty, he toiled in a cement factory from age 13, his hands roughened by labor. Yet, by 29, his savings sparked a bold vision. In a modest shop, he began crafting Hanafuda flower cards adorned with delicate designs of cherry blossoms, cranes, and crescent moons. These weren't just cards. They were miniature masterpieces, pressed from mulberry bark and painted with inks drawn from nature's palette. Fusajiro named his venture Nintendo Kapai, a nod, perhaps, to the phrase "leave luck to heaven," a sly hint at the gamble he was taking. But this was no innocent craft. Japan had long shunned playing cards, associating them with forbidden gambling dens run by the Yakuza, the country's fearsome gangsters. While Hanafuda's artistic flair skirted the law, it didn't escape the notice of these underworld kings. They adored Fusajiro's cards for their unmatched quality, snapping up fresh decks for every game to thwart cheaters. Soon, the Yakuza became Nintendo's biggest patrons, their demand fueling a business boom. Was Fusajiro naive, or did he know exactly who'd buy his wares? The truth lies in the shadows, but his cards spread like wildfire, turning his tiny shop into a national sensation. To keep up, he hired artisans to mimic his meticulous process, and in a daring move, partnered with the Japan Tobacco and Salt Company to stock his cards in every market stall. When Japan eased its card ban in 1907, Nintendo seized the chance to craft Western-style decks, cementing its crown as the country's top card maker. By 1929, Fusajiro, now 69, was ready to pass the torch. With no son to inherit, he orchestrated a marriage for his daughter to Sekio, a sharp-minded businessman who took the Yamauchi name and the reins of Nintendo. Sekio was a steady hand, scaling up production with new factories and sales teams, ensuring Nintendo's cards reached every corner of Japan. But like Fusajiro, he had no male heir. History looped back when Sekirio's son-in-law deserted his family, leaving behind a 5-year-old boy named Hiroshi Yamauchi. This child, raised in the shadow of abandonment, became Sekirio's only hope to carry the family legacy. In 1949, tragedy struck. Sekirio suffered a stroke, and 21-year-old Hiroshi, a law student with no business savvy, was summoned to lead Nintendo. Dropping his studies, he accepted, but with a ruthless demand, fire every relative in the company to prove his authority. It was a brutal start, and his youth sparked resentment among seasoned workers. Undeterred, Hiroshi purged dissenters, determined to forge a new path. He saw Nintendo's future not in cards alone, but as a global titan of fun. Inspired by a trip to America where Disney's magic captivated him, he secured a deal to print Mickey Mouse on Nintendo's cards, drawing in families and kids. Dropping Kapai from the name, he signaled a shift. Nintendo was no longer just about cards. The 1960s brought reckless ambition. Hiroshi chased global fame with bizarre ventures, taxi services, instant rice, even whispers of running love hotels for hourly trysts. These flops nearly bankrupted Nintendo, but a spark of salvation came in 1966. Strolling through the factory, Hiroshi spotted Gunpei Yokoi, a lowly worker, tinkering with a toy extendable hand. Sensing potential, Hiroshi ordered 1 million Ultra Hands for the holidays. Gunpei, once a janitor, rose to the challenge, and the toy sold 1.2 million units, pulling Nintendo from the brink. This triumph clarified Hiroshi's vision. Games, not rice or taxis, were Nintendo's future. Gunpei's creativity shone again in the 1970s, Inspired by a businessman fiddling with a calculator on a train, he crafted the Game & Watch, a pocket-sized electronic game powered by watch batteries. Launched in 1980, it flew off shelves, saving Nintendo once more. Meanwhile, arcade fever gripped Japan with Space Invaders draining coin purses nationwide. Hiroshi, ever the opportunist, jumped in with Radar Scope, a lackluster Space Invaders clone. When it flopped in America, leaving 3,000 unsold cabinets, Hiroshi held a contest to repurpose them. Enter Shigeru Miyamoto, a novice with a bold idea. A game inspired by Popeye, but with original characters: an ape named Donkey Kong, princess, and a mustachioed hero called Jumpman. Donkey Kong exploded, earning $280 million in 2 years. Jumpman, renamed Mario after a feisty landlord, became Nintendo's heart. Success drew danger. Universal Studios sued, claiming Donkey Kong mimicked King Kong. Lawyer John Kirby dismantled their case, revealing King Kong's public domain status. Nintendo won, naming a pink, plucky character Kirby in his honor. But in 1983, the video game industry crashed. Oversaturated with shoddy consoles and games, companies like Atari collapsed, burying unsold stock in landfills. Hiroshi saw opportunity in the chaos. In Japan, he launched the Famicom, a sleek, affordable console with vibrant games. It dominated, selling to 1 in 6 Japanese households. Renamed the Nintendo Entertainment System for America, it debuted in 1985 with Super Mario Bros., a sprawling adventure by Shigeru. With Gunpei's innovative D-pad controller and catchy music, the NES sold 60 million units, reviving the industry. Nintendo's knack for icons grew with The Legend of Zelda, a sprawling quest selling 7 million copies. The Game Boy, Gunpei's portable marvel, launched with Tetris, so addictive it haunted players' dreams. Selling twice as many units as the NES, it became a cultural staple. A joint venture and a cult classic Mario movie by Universal. Ironically, their old foe cemented Nintendo's dominance. But rivals loomed. Sega Genesis, with its 16-bit power and edgy mascot Sonic, challenged Nintendo's family friendliness. The Super Nintendo countered, but Sega's price cuts and bold ads fueled a fierce console war. Nintendo prevailed, bolstered by the Game Boy's success, while Sega's later consoles faltered. A new threat emerged in 1991. Nintendo's brief partnership with Sony for a CD-based console collapsed when Hiroshi, wary of Sony's ambitions, ditched them for Philips. Humiliated, Sony launched the PlayStation, a 3D powerhouse that outshone Nintendo's GameCube, Microsoft's Xbox, with hits like Halo piled on. In 2002, Hiroshi retired, leaving Nintendo to Satoru Iwata, a veteran developer. Facing Sony and Microsoft's dominance, Satoru and Shigeru crafted the Wii, a console for all with intuitive motion controls and simple games like Wii Sports. It sold 100 million units, outpacing rivals by targeting casual players. The Switch, blending home and portable play, continued this legacy. Yet Nintendo's shine has cracks. Its harsh copyright claims on YouTube creators demanding revenue or issuing strikes alienated fans. Greenpeace criticized its labor practices, and controversies linger. Still, in 2023, the Super Mario movie smashed records, proving Mario's enduring pull more iconic than Mickey Mouse. From Yakuza card dens to global screens, Nintendo's story is one of audacious bets and relentless innovation, a legacy that continues to shape how we play.